Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies. I am Osama Abi Murshid, Professor of History and Director of the Center, and I am delighted to introduce our distinguished speaker, Marwan Bishara, Senior Political Analyst at Al Jazeera English. Marwan Bishara is surely a familiar face and voice to you, as he is the editor and host of the Al Jazeera program Empire, on which he examines global powers and their agendas. He was previously professor of international relations at the American University in Paris and a fellow at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales. He writes and speaks extensively on global politics and is widely regarded as a leading authority on many of today's most relevant global issues, on U.S. foreign policy and on the greater Middle East. His writings have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek, The Guardian, Le Monde, and The Nation, among other outlets. He's also the chairman of the Galilee Foundation, which is a UK-based charity that annually provides over 100 students with university scholarships. Marwan Bishara is a Palestinian Arab born in Nazareth. He lives in Washington, D.C., Paris, and Doha. And in fact, I learned that he has just flown in from Doha and Cairo, so we are doubly pleased to have him with us today. He's the author of two books, Palestine, Israel, Peace or Apartheid, and the work he will be discussing tonight, The Invisible Arab, The Promise and Peril of the Arab Revolution. So please join me in welcoming Marwan Bishara.
Thank you, Osama. It's great to be with you. I'm not sure what you're doing on a Valentine's Day listening to me, but I just want to tell you that I love you too. As Osama mentioned, I just flew in from 14 hours flight, basically, 15-hour flight. And I have that face. I'm not sure what face it is, but they keep always telling me or asking me to fill these evaluation forms. So out of all the people in the airplanes, they always pick me to fill evaluation forms, maybe because I don't like flying, or I look like I'm pretty scared out there, or comfortable, I'm not sure. But whatever it is, some of these forms are long, some of them are short. Today's form was actually a short one. But it was, for me, it was pretty instructive. It certainly reminded me of a number of things that I wanted to talk about today. Because in the assessment form in the airplane, they ask you your point of departure, your point of arrival. They ask you how was the luggage? Did you lose anything on the way? They ask you about security. They ask you about the service. They ask you about delays. They ask you about stopovers, and so on and so forth. It's really easy to do that check-off thing. You know, arrival, Washington, D.C., Dallas Airport. I think a lot of the people over the last year that I've been following, in media especially, have been evaluating what's going on in the Arab world as if it was an assessment of a flight. And always in mind, point of departure, everyone wanted to know where did this start? And everyone had in mind a point of arrival. I don't know why. You know, oh, so Egypt is not liberal democracy, prosperous economy, and so on and so forth by the 12th of February. Hence, maybe we should assess that the revolution didn't go very well. Or that we project on those events, for example, in Tunisia, our own ideals or thoughts and so on and so forth, and then suddenly we're all disappointed, and hence we put these negative assessments of what the Arab Revolution is. But what is going on in the Arab world, the upheavals, the intifadas, the revolution, whichever way we will hopefully discuss that, you would want to term it, it's certainly, as I said, not as simple as an assessment of a flight. But I think that's what we've been doing. It takes, I don't want to say patience, but certainly it takes a bit more depth, a little bit more context, perspective, a bit more understanding of the reality of the region. And I sort of tried to do that in the book, say not just where we're at, but where are we coming from and where are we heading. So the question, of course, why is big. Try to explain why. But not in terms of a specific point. And some of those who try retroactively to explain, how we got here, as if revolutions can be explained, why we haven't figured them out, and now all of a sudden we all become wiser. I think there's no point of doing that. So there's absolutely no attempt of doing that. But certainly there's an evolution to the revolution, and there is evolution after the revolution. And that's what the book tries to do. So because what I heard from Osama, we try to do more of a discussion sort of thing with intelligent and bright minds in universities like here, like Georgetown. And by the way, did I say thank you for having me here? Well, anyway, thank you for having me here. What I will do is I'm gonna take the simple way out instead of doing a major sort of thesis of sort. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick the 5 main words on the cover, try to explain them to you. The invisible and the Arab and the promise and the peril and the Arab and the revolution. So 5 words, concepts. Invisible. Why invisible? There are 2 ways of looking at the invisible. There is locally invisible and invisible to the outside world. The people of that region have been invisible. The best saying of all that describes this in terms of the people in the outside world is the one that says something about a falling tree makes more noise than a growing forest. And people have been obsessing, say, for example, at least over the last 10 years, over the bin Ladens of the world, of that falling tree, that no one paid attention to the growing forest. They paid attention to 300, say, for example, jihadists or suicide bombers, or whichever way you like to term them, but not to the 300 million others. The growing tree was not a media extravaganza, and hence we didn't really pay attention to it. We were paying attention to the fallen tree. But that, of course, has a history. The Arabs were invisible because the outside world, notably the West, looked at the region either through the prisms of oil, energy security, so-called, terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic extremism in that sense, or Israel and Israel's security. These were the prisms, and through these prisms, we couldn't see what was going on in the Arab world, because the perspective was through Israel's security, through energy security, through national security, so-called, meaning through terrorism and so on and so forth. So the Arabs were not really looked at. And here I'm talking, of course, in broad brushes. I'm not talking about specialized departments such as yours here in Georgetown. I'm talking in general terms. They were invisible. To the inside of the region, to the internal, to the domestic scene in the region, the Arabs, the majority of people, were made invisible, either through censorship, imprisonment. You made sure that anyone who had something interesting to say would never make it on state television or in state media or in state newspapers and so on and so forth. And most of the media was, for several decades, controlled by authoritarian or totalitarian regimes. So if you had anything interesting to say, you were invisible to the rest of the region, to the rest of the people. You were imprisoned, you were tortured, you were intimidated, and simply you weren't allowed to be heard, to be seen in the Arab region. An entire generation was not to be heard. An entire generation was a subject of a discussion, but never participant in the discussion. So that's the bit about the invisible. Arab. So it's the invisible Arab. I ask a question at the beginning of the book. Why are we only seeing these revolutions, that domino effect, happening in the Arab world, among Arab-speaking people? I mean, We've seen inspiration. We've seen, Occupy Wall Street saying something about the